Hey, welcome everybody to the Culture Works live stream series. I'm your host, Chester Elton, and our guest, as always, by the way, is my wonderful co-author and dear friend, Adrian Gostick. So put in the chat where you're from. We're always interested to see who's tuning in, and you'll notice in the back, I always point the wrong way, little little bit of Halloween for you. Yeah, that was my son Garrett's artwork from 25 years ago. At any rate, we digress. As many of you know, and if you don't know, you should be following him on Forbes. Adrian writes a wonderful column about things in the workplace, things that we can do to be better leaders, to be more productive, and so on. And he wrote a wonderful article on 4 strategies to lead through uncertainty. And so my first question is, Adrian, why did you write this article and why now?
Well, as you know, Chess, I think every single company we go into to give a speech or to do executive coaching, every one of them says now we're going through a lot of change here. And, everybody's going through a lot of change. And we make it feel like, well, it's just right now or something. What was interesting is I think it was the Greek philosopher Heraclitus who said in 500 BC, change is the only constant. So that's where that quote came from. So that was 2,500 years ago, and nothing has changed. We're always going to be changing. Yeah. So instead of saying, look, let's hopefully things will get better, what we're saying right now is let's learn how to lead through uncertainty as leaders.
Yeah, I love the old saying too, where it says, if you want a really good new idea, read an old book. There's a lot of wisdom that we kind of forget about. Well, you have 4 great strategies. Now, our time is always limited, so I want to jump right into it. You talk about embrace the unknown with confidence. Usually when you're stepping into the unknown, the first thing that disappears is your confidence. So how do I do that?
Boy, that's a great question because you're right. The brain wants certainty. The brain loves certainty. It seeks out certainty. And so uncertain makes our brains, and some people are better than that than others. In our book, Anxiety at Work, we wrote about, a couple of basketball players, professionals that did well with uncertainty or badly. And so some of us are a little better than others. But if you remember in our book, we also wrote about Lutz Zob from Microsoft, who was this great leader who, when we studied him, his people would say, look, we feel like we're going into the dark together, like we're holding hands going into the dark versus, there's all this uncertainty. Well, how did he do it? Well, he got them involved in the debate. Andre would be arguing one side and Susan the other, and they would be debating at the table. And then he would say, this has been great. Now, Susan, you argue Andre's side. Andre, you argue Susan's side. And they would tell us, look, by the end, we didn't know who was arguing for what. We just wanted to find the best idea.
Yeah. It's funny. Kim Scott in her book, Radical Candor, uses that same example. Get people to switch sides. This idea, too, that it's exciting and that it's an opportunity rather than a threat was a great idea that you brought out in the article. So often we think of uncertainty as danger as opposed to opportunity. Something new, something exciting. So I love that. Embrace the unknown with confidence. Then you go into something that, is ever present, and that is communication. Communicate not just with authenticity, but with transparency. So why the two? Why do you have to have both?
When you think about communication during tough times, and this is what you and I preach to audiences or to people we're coaching, is that it is about clarity. And what's the first thing you have to be clear with people about is, what's in it for me? Because if I don't know that there's some benefit to this, I am not going to actually care. I'm not going to listen as much as, you you may sign my paychecks. I still want to know that you're going to be clear with me. Now that's around transparency. Now, authenticity is that idea around I trust the messenger. And that, as we know, is built around, are you consistent? Are you clear in your communication as a leader? And so often we see this falling apart, don't we? That leaders, they just get too busy to communicate the why behind the decision.
Yeah. And it's interesting, too. You talk about that when you're authentic and you're transparent, it builds your leadership credibility. I think we've all had leaders that said, well, listen, that's on a need to know basis, and you probably never need to know, And so when a leader is open and sharing and on big issues, Now, there's always that time when you say, well, look, I can't share that with you because it's against the law. We're gonna get sued. The other thing though is I'm going to tell you as much as I can and keep you up to date. It makes people feel like they're in the loop, doesn't it?
Oh, it's so true. I remember Tom Peters did a survey years ago now, but he tried to identify, and he interviewed thousands of people about the characteristics that make up a credible leader. And he was expecting things like this person is an expert at what they do, or they're visionary. And no, actually, the number one thing was that they're honest, is that they're clear, they're not full of guile or deception. That's what makes credibility, is that first and foremost, do you do what you say you will do? Do you give me the information you have when you have it? And you're right. Sometimes, hey, we're about to go into a merger, or we're about to buy a plant somewhere that the competitors can compete with. Well, yeah, there may be some times, but for the most part, we can be a lot clearer than we are being.
Yeah. Yeah. I do love that too about, look, you acknowledge the uncertainty, you acknowledge the pitfalls. Look, this isn't going to be easy. It's going to be hard. I do love that leaders that bring in that excitement though, and say, oh, wow, look at this opportunity.
Yeah.
Look at the chance we have to do something maybe no one else has ever done. Now, you've already talked a little bit about step 3, which is encourage curiosity and healthy debate. The healthy debate part we've kind of talked about. Curiosity, we talk about, great leaders and people that want to develop themselves are always curious. But you talk about that curiosity leading to healthy debate and leading to psychological safety. How does curiosity and debate? I mean, because normally when you're in debate, that's danger, right? I want to win the debate.
Well, let's throw some. I had a client I was just on with actually, and he sent me some interesting statistics. So let's kind of think about this, and then we'll get to. He says, so 1903, Wilbur and Orville Wright flew their first flight that lasted 12 seconds at Kitty Hawk. 8 years later, Cal Rogers made the first transcontinental flight across the United States. Wow. It took 8 years to go from a 12-second flight to crossing the entire country. Now, and another stat he gave me was 12 years, when we first released the first mobile phone, it took 12 years to reach 50 million users. It took Facebook 4 years to do the same, reach 50 million users. WhatsApp did it in 1 year, and Pokemon Go did it in 19 days. So are we accelerating that speed of change? Absolutely. And the point is, you can't do it alone. As a leader, you can't make these huge leaps and get 50 million people on your platform in 19 days by yourself. You have to have people. And we all know we're more engaged when we have a chance to share our voice, to contribute, to express what we feel. But you have to make it healthy for people. And so, you and I, we often give the example of Bell Helicopter when we worked with Mitch Schneider there. And what did he do? He set rules for debate so his team could debate issues and get the best ideas out. I thought that was brilliant. Not the way that, the ideas themselves, but it was brilliant that he set debate rules so that people would feel safe debating.
Yeah, I do love the setting up the rules. When the one rule that was always my favorite is we argue about the issue. We don't argue about the person. We attack the problem. We don't attack people. Because when that starts to happen, boy, feelings get hurt and the guard goes up and it gets crazy. And to that idea of my voice is heard, there is a certain amount of safety there with the rules and through repetition. I'm such a big fan of, look, the first couple of times you do this, you're probably going to do it badly, and that's okay. You just, admit that, hey, we're figuring this out as we go along. Well, I know one of your favorite subjects, and we did a whole chapter on this in Anxiety at Work, is overcoming perfectionism as a way to lead through uncertainty. Why is perfectionism so high on your list?
Well, back in the day when you and I were first looking for our first jobs, some knucklehead told us, if you get asked that tough question, what's your biggest weakness? You're supposed to say, well, I'm a perfectionist. Well, we realize that's a terrible thing to try and push for, because perfectionists actually get less done. Sometimes they're afraid to start projects because, well, if it's not going to be perfect. Other times they hold themselves or others to unrealistic standards. So what we really are looking for is somebody who does what we call healthy striving. They strive, but they realize at times, okay, that's good enough. I'm going to move on. You remember the story our co-author, my son Anthony, tells, who worked in a genetics lab, and he's a cell biologist. And what he does is he extracts DNA from samples. And well, it was his first week, so they gave him some decade-old samples to extract DNA. And he was only getting 7 or 8 out of 10. And he says, by Wednesday, I was getting more and more freaked out. He says, I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating. I was really worried that I was only getting about 70 or 80% of these DNA samples to work. He says, my boss comes in Friday. How did it all go? And he says, oh, not very well. I only got 7 or 8 out of 10 to work each time. And he says, yeah, that's about right. And later he says, why didn't he tell me that at the beginning?
Yeah, that would have been good to know, right?
Yeah. And he said, let people know what good enough looks like and help them move on.
Yeah, this the quote that I love when you say pursuit of perfection does not produce great results. It stops people from taking actionable risks. We expect our people to be curious, to experiment, to get comfortable with uncertainty of outcomes. Yeah, I do love when we put the expectations that are very clear. I don't need a 150 slide deck, with animation and video clips from the office. I just need 5 bullet points. That's all I need. Now, before we jump in, we've only got two minutes left, but you talk about when there is a gap in that communication and instruction where anxiety really goes up. And that's what you're talking about, isn't it? Tony didn't have the right parameters. Yeah. And in that gap, what do? We assume the worst, that I'm failing, right?
Well, and I hate to generalize, but we're going to generalize here, is especially our younger people who have more, especially anybody maybe in their 20s or somebody who's new to your organization. They're just going to have more anxiety because they're new. Maybe they don't have the bank account that can last if they get fired or something, so they are more fearful. And fearful employees don't create great outcomes for you. You want people to be confident, to be able to take a risk. So the more clear we are up front, the better the outcomes will be. And, you and I know this. We've done a lot of surveying, a lot of focus groups. Managers think they're being clear. And yet when we interview their employees, probably in less than half of times they go, I don't know what my manager wants. He or she wants 50 things. I got 50 priorities. And when you have 50 priorities, you have no priorities.
No priorities. Well, I love the conclusion of the article. He says, leading through uncertainty requires a blend of vision, confidence, transparency, curiosity, and a commitment to healthy striving. I love that last one. It really does create a culture where, you can get things done even when there's a lot of uncertainty. If you manage it well, you communicate it, you've got that vision and so on. Again, if you're not following Adrian on Forbes, you should. It's Forbes.com. His name is Adrian Gostick. He is beyond brilliant. He's been my friend for forever. And I always learn something new when I'm talking to Adrian. But as always, in our podcast and in our conversations and in our life in general, if you had one thing you wanted people to take away from this conversation, I'll give you the last word.
Well, thanks. What we need to do is embrace uncertainty as this force that's been around, as we just learned, for 2,500 years. Embrace it as a dynamic force that can make your organization and your people stronger. Be excited about it, be motivated by it, but lead your people. Don't just stumble through uncertainty.
Excellent. Hey, follow us on LinkedIn. Go to thecultureworks.com. Lots of great stuff there. And thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Cheers.